And here we are, Sam, episode 10. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's we're recording this right before Thanksgiving, so holidays are here, man. It's
I'm
crazy.
ready for him too, man. I could use some little bit of downtime, so looking forward to it.
Ready for a break, huh? Well, I
Absolutely.
am excited to introduce Mr. Tony Turner, CEO of Opswright, our guest today. How you doing, Tony?
I'm good, Michael. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you too, Sam. I know we've been connected online for a while, but I don't think we've ever really engaged.
Yeah, we run in the same circles, right? But sometimes that's how it works out. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's funny because you were speaking at HUSECCon recently, and there was all these people that I know, Sam and I know, that speak at HUSECCon, and we still don't get to meet them even at the conference. It's kind of funny because there's too much going on that week. But well, we're going to talk about your talk at HUSECCon here in a little bit, but first we want to give some updates on HUSECCon itself. So everybody who was there, thank you very much. It was a really, really, really good couple of days. We had a ton of people there, largest by far, Sam, that we've ever had.
yeah, we had over 1,400 people this year, and those that were there could tell we cannot be back there anymore. Not at that capacity, right? It was shoulder to shoulder, and it got pretty darn crowded a lot of times. So excited to for next year.
Yep. Well, and to that point, and if you were there at the beginning in the opening talk, you know this when Sam and I were introducing the conference, but we are moving to the George R. Brown Convention Center next year. And if you're not from Houston, just know that the George R. Brown Convention Center is a huge center that can fit 50,000 plus people. Not saying we're going to have that many people at the conference.
I don't know that you or I and the volunteers are ever going to be able to handle that capacity, but definitely a lot of opportunity to growth. And so to that point, please note your calendars for September 24th, 25th.
Yep.
And make sure you have that blocked off, and that's got to be your go-to conference for the year. And still going to have dirt cheap tickets like we always do, and top quality talent doing the content delivery. Folks like Tony.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm really excited about the move over there. We're going to be able to grow and stay there for a really long time. I don't actually see us moving out of there if everything works out right. So hopefully we can stay there. So that's the big announcement for where we're going to be next year. Next announcement is the TAB Cyber Foundation. If you're not aware of that, that is an organization and foundation that we have built with cooperation with a good friend of ours, Dan Broussard, and it's his son's foundation. And we are trying to get underprivileged youth and veterans who want to get into the cybersecurity community right now in the Houston area. We'll expand later, but try to get them in who aren't, if they're not college bound, really, they want to go the certification route. So we're trying to get folks into the cybersecurity community in those two groups primarily. We are now accepting applications to that. So we'll include notes on how to get to that application, but we're seeing a lot of activity around that. A whole lot of people donated from HUSECCon. We appreciate those donations, but if you got people who want to apply for that, please have them go out there and look at it. And if they got any questions, they can reach out to us and ask about that as well. And then
it's all about building that community. So if you know somebody, please direct them our way.
Yep, please do. And we got one more announcement. Anybody who was at the conference who did some of the book signings, there was one book signing, which was Justin Hutchins, aka Hutch, who his book wasn't out yet, and you got it signed, and you get a book, but you got a little piece of paper signed that you can, or a little sticker that you can put in the book when it comes out. From what we see now, right, it'd be about early 2024 when that comes out. So just be on the lookout for it. But we'll let everybody know who signed up for those, that you'll be able to get that book and claim it. So, Sam, anything else?
Yeah. Also, don't forget we're been posting, or Lauren rather has been posting content from the talks, that including Tony's if you missed it. So both on Vimeo and on YouTube. So if you missed any of the talks or you just weren't able to come, I know there were quite a few people who couldn't get tickets. We've posted a lot of that stuff up there, and we'll continue to clean things up and post them as we have them. But go to the channels and subscribe and start listening and learning.
Yep, please do. We got it in both places there in case YouTube decides to, maybe somebody played some music on their talk or something and YouTube decides to get rid of it. You never know, but we do have it in both places. I think we'll have a little quick musical break, and then we will jump over to talk to Tony. So see you on the other side. Okay, hope everybody enjoyed that music. So, Mr. Tony Turner, CEO of Opswright, you came out to HUSECCon, did the privilege of coming out to HUSECCon. It was our privilege that you were there, not your privilege to speak there. But you, maybe it is your
both. It was both.
No, we appreciate you coming out to HUSECCon. We had a lot of great content. Watched your talk. Like I've told you, we don't get a chance to watch all of them, but at the conference, so I try to watch as many as I can. And I recently watched your talk. Really good stuff. Why don't you give us a few minute little overview of what your talk was about at HUSECCon, and then we'll kind of dig into the content.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michael. So first off, just real quickly, I just wanted to thank you for having me out at HUSECCon, and speaking as a conference organizer. I founded B-Sides Orlando like a decade ago and ran the event for a number of years before I handed it off. So I know it goes into running an event like this, right? And I got to say, HUSECCon is fantastic. It's my first time coming, obviously my first time speaking as well, and is a really, really fantastic event. And you should both be very, very proud. It was amazing.
Thank you. We appreciate
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the talk that I delivered at HUSECCon started from a question that I was asking myself, about a year or two ago, where I find a lot of times in cybersecurity we suffer from this echo chamber problem, where everything's a cyber problem, and how do we solve the risks in critical infrastructure and other industries? Well, let's throw some cyber at it, because that's what we do, right? That's our thing, right? And so I was trying to ask myself, like, are there some non-cybersecurity related problems that are kind of tangential to our domain, but are not like squarely suited on adversary did a bad thing, right? Can we learn some lessons from this, right? And so I started exploring some other digital failures that had occurred historically. And I said, what can we learn from this, right? Like some really catastrophic events, right? Like, everything from like the Boeing 737 MAX failure, where hundreds of people lost their lives. Now, is this like an adversarial driven cybersecurity related issue? No, it's not. But it is definitely tied to a failure in the design process and the secure design process, and that related to system failures that cause people to die, right? Now, are there some lessons that we could take away from that an adversary could use to then embed that in some sort of malicious campaign, or as we see this like advent of like cyberkinetic war, like we're seeing in Ukraine carry out? Like, are there lessons learned that could go beyond just, okay, like we have an incident, we have a problem, but escalate that on like a national level to create serious consequences, right? So that was really kind of what I was trying to explore. Now, some of you who know me know that I'm pretty deep in these topics of secure by design and cyber-informed engineering. And so this was all kind of very closely related to this. And what we explored as we went to the talk, we looked at a few incidents. We looked at, an oil and gas platform in the North Sea, Sleipner 8 platform that sank a couple decades ago. We looked at the Ariane 4 rocket that failed due to a floating point calculation error. We looked at obviously the Boeing 737 Max, and we tried to explore how did these things occur and how could we prevent these things from occurring in the future to prevent these catastrophes. And we really hope that our adversaries don't latch on to these things. But I think as defenders, it's important for us to think through this process to determine how we can properly secure our infrastructure against adversarial threat and accidental consequences as well.
So, and it's interesting. Side note there too. You may want to take a look into this. This is very interesting because it just came recently. I'd heard about the Bhopal incident, which was decades ago as well, and killed a lot of people. Had nothing to do with cyber, but it was a event-driven incident, right? And Netflix has a thing called The Railway Men Out. I haven't started watching it yet, but I can't wait to dig my feet into that. The one thing you mentioned here, and I want to bring that up as a question as you talk about, you mentioned secure by design, you mentioned cyber informed engineering. They are not the same thing, right? And I know a lot of people do tend to get the two mixed up. Can you maybe expand a little bit on what are the differences and how do they help each other?
Yeah, so secure by design is just what it really comes down to is prioritization of security as a functional requirement when we're designing and building systems, right? I think historically we have seen security as this kind of bolt-on thing that we do later in the process. And, a few years back, we started seeing the application security space and embody this whole concept of shifting left, right? Let's move to the left in our kind of, design, build, test methodology, right? If we can move in the design phase, then we can see a drastic reduction in the cost for resolving vulnerabilities, depending on the study, anywhere between 10x to 100x reduction in cost. And obviously that makes everything downstream move much better. Cyber-informed engineering is really an approach that's been proposed by the Department of Energy that can help an organization, and it's largely focused on critical infrastructure, achieve a secure by design status with the infrastructure that's being built today, as well as to perform these kinds of approaches retroactively on legacy infrastructures. We all know, and in critical infrastructure, some of these environments, they have lifespans of 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more, right? So in many instances, the opportunity to design that securely is, it's gone, right? So we have to figure out where are the issues and how can we retrofit things and how can we adopt a secure by design approach moving forward. But the really interesting thing here, and I think a big differentiation between secure by design and cyber informed engineering, is regardless of the words in the name, cyber is in the name of cyber informed engineering. It's not about cyber. I mean, it's about digital causes of failure, but there's a lot that goes into that. And we look at concepts like engineer controls, like emergency stop, bypass valves, these kinds of things. These are not cybersecurity controls. But what it really comes down to is I have a critical function. I have to protect my critical function. There may be digital causes, but I may have a manual mechanism for ensure that the bad thing doesn't actually happen. Secure by design really doesn't focus on those things. It's really largely focused on the cybersecurity design that goes into the product or system that I'm building. As you'll see from a lot of the efforts in industry, there's a lot more focus on the product than the system itself, which I'm sure we'll get into later, but that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, I mean, you made a point earlier. It's like some of these systems are 20, 30 years old, if not more. I mean, what it lends itself to is almost like a why are we doing this now type of mindset when most things in critical infrastructure, and you guys know this much better than I do, aren't going to change very quickly. So if you're in a mode of secure by design, I mean, yeah, any new systems that are coming out, but when I look at some of the breakdown of what people describe as secure by design in regards to existing systems are really just kind of security best practices unless you're refactoring and rebuilding the thing from the ground up. So I guess from your perspective, I mean, how, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, how good of a concept, or how is this something that's really going to have an effect anytime in the next 30 or 40 years from this point, unless it's a brand new system? Does that make, I'm not trying to be completely, you know,
No. I completely understand where you're coming from there, and I I think the way we think about security is largely driven based off of our optics of the security problem, right? And if you think about how much we knew about what was happening inside of critical infrastructure even 10 years ago, just due to the heavy focus on OPSEC and reducing visibility into what was happening inside of critical infrastructure. There's a lot we didn't know, right? And that's not to say that things weren't happening, but I think there's a lot we didn't know. Now, with the advent of the vendor landscape, it's providing a lot more transparency and visibility, more threat information, more incidents are becoming widely understood in the media. And yes, targeting is increasing. We're starting to see real world impacts, whether it's a ransomware style event or something else. The topic is becoming more and more important, and we're starting to see more of this information. Now, traditionally, IT has, I think, been by the security industry, been more well understood, right? And we knew that we needed to do those things. So now to answer your question, Michael, like the cat's out of the bag on a lot of this. And to your point, I think a lot of the things that we need to do here, they are security hygiene, security control related things. I mean, look at the Project Basecamp research from 10 years ago that identified a lot of just basic security weaknesses in these systems. No authentication, no encryption. Like we talk a lot about zero trust in like modern cybersecurity context. Like we look at these OT networks, and it is the exact opposite of what you think of from zero trust. It's like 100% trust. You can throw anything on that network, and we'll take it, right? Like that's for real. Like, and we're so gun shy about the operational impacts that introducing security controls creates, that there's a little bit of fear there, and some of it is legitimate, some of it is real, and certainly we need to consider those things. But this creates friction, right? And we have multiple stakeholders between IT and OT that kind of complicates this issue. But absolutely, there's definitely some value in introducing some of these controls inside these legacy environments, but we have to do so cautiously, because the impacts of failure, if we introduce too much legacy and break an automation process because we introduce a security control and there's bad consequences, that may be more impactful than an adversary actually gaining a foothold inside that environment. So we do need to have a sensible process when we go down this road.
And that makes sense. My thing is, I feel, and this is somewhat of a rhetorical question, I feel like this deja vu, right? We've already gone through this. This is AppSec all over again, right? Back in the AppSec days, when I touched on that, and Michael and I both were tangential in a company at the time, but it was the core problem was you were churning out code. And to your point, Tony, like we're bringing out new product, like OEMs are bringing out product. They're not paid to design a secure product. They're paid to design a product that functions as the customer needs. So it's always been a core question of we just not teaching the fundamentals. Like when you go to code back in the day, when you went to code and learn whatever code you wanted, they didn't teach you how to code securely. That's why we need the AppSec products. That's why we needed all that kind of that area, right? And now we exasperate the situation by adding a whole new audience to the discussion. Right now we're talking about, hey, OT, hey, by the way, this thing we were talking about, 10 years ago, hey, come on in, you need to start talking about it too, right? And I just feel like, and it does, because now we have to kind of start from ground zero again and start over, right, with the discussion. And it's good that we have more people that have a little bit better approach to it. But I guess my thing is, how do we really make this something that gets addressed in the OT space now that we've already had a good good charge at it in the IT space.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges we have here, it's kind of this nexus point of two separate problems that kind of exacerbate the issue. One being we have more knowledge domains that have to coalesce in order to do security inside of OT, right? Like how many environments have dedicated hardware engineers inside their IT program, right? That have like deep engineering expertise. No, all this stuff is pretty commoditized, right? Like, I go buy the thing off of CDW and I install it, and I got to hire an admin that knows how to manage the thing, maybe an architect to design the infrastructure in the first place. But once we have it in place, it's mostly an operations and support problem. That's not the way things are inside OT, where we have a lot more engineering resources that are inside this environment. And now we're telling them that they need to understand cyber too, on top of all the other complicated engineering problems that they have to tackle. And you combine that with like all the political issues and stakeholder collaboration challenges inside that environment. And we wind up with this really, really complicated thing that no one person inside the organization understands. Now, to your point, Sam, from an AppSec standpoint, I'm going to take it even further into like looking kind of the direction that cloud has gone with cloud security posture management, right? Like cloud suffers from the same problem. Like no one in IT knows how all this crap in the cloud works anymore. Like everything's all abstracted. Like I know how my application works. I know how I use the AWS APIs or whatever, right? But like I don't really know how everything works anymore. And that's why we need really good tools in place to kind of help us understand, okay, what does my security posture actually look like, and what do I need to be concerned with, and what do I need to deal with today? I think we have a complete lack of these capabilities inside the OT space. Like where is the OT security posture management solution? It doesn't exist. It's not a thing, right? We have piece parts, right? We've got, visibility, OT visibility. You've got some threat intel. We got some folks that are working on, serial problems or whatever, right? But they're all very kind of piece part kind of things. Like for a defender that really wants to understand what is the security posture of my entire OT infrastructure, the only option I have is to throw IT tools at the problem that weren't built. They weren't built for the OT environment. So
well, it's absolutely an interesting point, Tony, because I mean, literally the last, I think it was episode 9, the podcast that we recorded on stage at HSecCon was all about the proliferation of APIs and how they've pretty much become, I mean, they're just everywhere, right? So in the IT space, and what it's done is created an ability to do or a glut, I would say, in some ways, some people might say, of posture management tools, because it's so easy to access those environments. Even if you don't know what all they look like, it's extremely easy now to access those via API. And anybody with some software engineering talent can go write a front end, put some indicators of compromise intelligence in there, and be able to suss out whether you've got some, to your point, that does not exist. And probably somewhat by design, you don't want to have connections into every single piece and every layer of your critical infrastructure, because then, I mean, at least you only want it one direction, right? Where the information's only flowing one way, where somebody can't do bad stuff in one of those. So,
and I think we're seeing, I think some of the changes that we're seeing in our technology landscape inside the OT environment, and the digital transformation of OT is really kind of, I think we're going to see a drive in the same direction, right? To be frank, I mean, we're already starting to see, SEL uses containers inside some of their products now. We're starting to see some cloud management come into things. I mean, even, kind of staunchly legacy-minded approaches like NERC SIP are starting to bring virtualization and cloud into the conversation. We're starting to see more unification of standards. We're starting to see more APIs provisioned inside of OT, but we still have a very legacy-minded approach to how we address this. And some of that, again, goes back to my comment earlier about the life cycle of these technologies, right? Where they get installed and they stay there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I think it's going to move slower, but I think we're still going to wind up in the same place. But are we going to be ready when that happens? Right? Like, we have people starting to roll out some of these newer technologies inside of critical infrastructure. If we are not there ready for them to do so with a secure by design approach, and then they're there for another 20, 30, 40 years, what do we do then? Right? That's a problem.
Well, Tony, this has been great. Really, really. We know this is a huge problem in critical infrastructure. You and Sam are definitely, like I said earlier, way deeper in that world than I am on a day-to-day basis. So I appreciate you coming on here and talk about it with us. I encourage everybody to go out on the link that we provide to Tony's talk and look at these issues, even if you're not in OT, right? This is this affects everybody. I mean, the things we've brought it up on here before, Sam and I have, it's not cyber related, but if you lived in Texas and you were here in February of 2019, I think it was, is that the right date?
I think it was after that. It was
2020
during the COVID thing. So it was, a couple years ago.
Yeah,
21.
Snowpocalypse, basically. I mean, that wasn't cyber related, but to your point, I mean, an adversary could take advantage of something like that, right? So,
but it's a resilience thing, and a resilience is at the core of everything that we want to focus on when it comes to securing infrastructure, right? It is the resilience and safety are the top two concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that occurs to me when we are put a lot of focus, like if you look where System Secure by Design is really focused, it's on the product OEMs and shifting the scope of responsibility on the product OEMs, when I think we really need a more shared responsibility model to tackle these issues, because the reality is the product OEMs don't even know how their products are used sometimes. So when you think about the topic of threat modeling is a valuable way to chase a secure by design approach, number one, CISA isn't even advocating for threat modeling in their guidance, which I think is a shame. But secondly, with a laser focus on the product, it completely ignores the downstream way of how technology is installed, right? So I think the system integrator probably has a much greater impact on the eventual security for an asset owner or operator than even the product OEM does, right? Because I can take a bunch of secure products and I can install and implement them in really terrible ways, and I can support them in really terrible ways, and I can do all kinds of really terrible things to good products. And on the flip side, I can take products that maybe are not 100% secure, but I can implement mitigating controls and harden that environment in ways that even the product OEM didn't account for. So,
well,
good argument to have a security architect as part of your project team.
Absolutely.
And nobody in this industry ever makes things do things they're not supposed to, right?
That's an everyday thing, right? Like we bought the thing. We didn't know what we were going to really use it for until we needed to use it, and then it's very iterative in our approach. I was working. I worked with a few large electric power companies that they'll buy a large stock of RTUs that just sit on the shelf, and they don't even know where the RTU is going to go or what they're going to use it for. Is it going into like a substation that supports a critical defense facility, or is it like a rural substation that has a much different risk profile? Like, what am I going to use this thing for, and where am I going to use it, and like what mission does it support? They have no idea. They just know they need the thing, and procurement says, hey, let's buy a bunch of them because it's cheaper to do it that way. And then meanwhile, all this technology and security people wind up inheriting a bunch of stuff that we're like, what is this for? Like
shelfware.
What did we inherit?
Well, I just sat through a GridX exercise last week, right? And they used the heck out of all those stock PLCs, but at the end of it, I'll tell you.
I'm sure they did. But did the product OEMs have any visibility into the logic that was going to be programmed on those PLCs? Probably not.
Well, but
how do you threat model that?
That's our mission, is to find all of those that overspent, go buy them for pennies on the dollar, and we put little labs together. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Tony. Well, thank you so much for jumping on here. Really appreciate it. Again, everybody who's listening, encourage you to go listen to Tony's talk, watch Tony's talk at HSecCon, and hopefully you can make it next year, Tony.
I sure hope so.
All right. Sam, any parting words?
Not at all. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Or if this is already posted afterwards, hope you had a great Thanksgiving and looking forward to the rest of the holiday season.
Same here. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for episode 10, and we will see you next time on episode 11.